Copenhagen today. Thank you. I was looking before, I didn't have time, but I was looking actually for a little flute to bring with me. Stuff for work, but I couldn't find one in time. You've said, Lars, you told briefly really what the story is all about. So, and considering your draconian libel and hate speech laws, I think I should shut up and sit down. But I will give it a try and tell you what has happened. I'm honored really to and privileged to accept this award from the International Danish Free Press Society. It's a dedicated and effective warrior in the battle to protect freedom of speech from mounting attack on it in Western societies and especially, hopefully, in Denmark. Thank you for your effort. Okay, that's great. Thank you for your effort. And let us continue to work together to ensure that freedom of expression is strengthened and protected. Special thanks to Lars, who is helping uphold that freedom in Denmark by leading the fight to ensure that reporters can speak the truth without fear of censorship and intimidation by those abusing Denmark's inadequate libel and hate speech laws. Those laws are written so broadly as to allow a suit by almost anyone who claims that he feels insulted or intimidated by a public statement. The truth does not matter, and whether the statement was meant to incite or injure is irrelevant. The prosecution is subjective, and the judgment can be entirely based on the plaintiff's misguided perception. I think I got it right. Many European countries have similarly low standards for defamation suits. Merely speaking one's mind risks civil and criminal suits. The regional hate speech and defamation laws in Europe facilitate the triumph of censorship and the silencing of truth. I am fully aware of the threats to my financial and even my physical, whatever finances are left, and even my physical well-being should I say something that Danes, Europeans, and even foreigners from distant lands could find and interpret as offensive. Indeed, your laws force me to limit my remarks today. You don't know how much, but it really did. But I invite you to look at the website of the American Center for Democracy. It is New York-based. This is the organization I'm headed. And you will really get a fuller perspective of the issues that we cover and the causes we promote to protect our freedoms, not only free speech. I have devoted the past 6 years to defeating libel tourism and its chilling effects on free speech in the United States. In 2005, the world's most notorious libel tourist, Saudi billionaire Khalid bin Mahfouz, sued me for libel because I detailed his funding of radical Islamic terror groups in my book, Funding Evil, How Terrorism is Financed and How to Stop It. I think it would be good at this point to show the a little few minutes of YouTube. It's kind of cute.
Saudi Arabia, a country of 27 million people, home to one of the world's most brutal and repressive monarchies. The nation is comprised of two categories: the royal family, whose king, business owners, and thousands of princes benefit mainly from oil funds, and everyone else. Virtually all inhabitants outside of the royal family are considered possessions of the kingdom and are treated as such. Western freedoms such as due process, equality before the law, and freedom of speech are completely rejected. Islam is the only recognized religion, and its associated Sharia law defines society. Sharia, which denies basic human rights to women, gays, and non-believers, carries extremely harsh penalties for religious infractions. Sharia has even been proposed as an alternate penal code in free-thinking Western nations. Dr. Rachel Ehrenfeldt is a renowned expert on Saudi Arabia's connection to terrorist funding. She's been called in to consult for the United States Defense Department, the Treasury Department, and various intelligence agencies. Dr. Ehrenfeldt has literally written the book on financing terror.
Terrorism costs a lot of money. Terrorist acts per se don't cost much, but to prepare the base from which such an action can be taken costs billions of dollars. You have to recruit people, you have to train them, you have to sustain them, you have to buy weapons, you have to corrupt officials, you have to do many things, and that costs money. And the Saudis have been doing it since the 70s.
Her book, Funding Evil, is the definitive guide for following the terrorist money trail. One of the men she profiles in her book is Sheikh Khalid bin Mahfouz, a Saudi banker among the world's richest men, with an estimated fortune of $3.2 billion. Dr. Ehrenfeldt documents Mahfouz's support of Islamic terrorist activities by exposing his bogus charitable and banking institutions.
These organizations, these Saudi charitable organizations, funded Al-Qaeda, fund Hamas. They give money towards their terrorist activities.
The allegations in her book prompted Mahfouz to file suit against Dr. Ehrenfeldt, accusing her of libel.
He sued me because I wrote a book called Funding Evil, and in the book I documented how Saudi Arabia and Saudis are funding terrorism. Not only them, but that's part of the book. And he is just one name of many names in the book.
But this case wasn't filed in American court, where the book was initially published. It was filed in a British court, where libel laws favor the accuser.
The book was just published in October 2003 and was not even sold in England. He and his lawyers, or somebody on his behalf, bought 23 copies of the book in England, and so that they can claim jurisdiction, and said that I caused him damage. I libeled him because he's not funding terrorism. Of course, he denies it. He says that he never knowingly funded terrorism. I didn't write in the book that he knowingly did anything.
Because English courts aren't bound by a written constitution that protects freedom of expression, their court system has proven to be fertile ground for foreign-born libel suits. In fact, the importing of these cases has even developed into its own industry, dubbed libel tourism. Many Saudi Arabians accused of providing support to terror activities have exploited the English legal system again and again. This process has recently been dubbed the Arab effect in the English press, and has made London the world's capital for this type of lawsuit. Many journalistic publications have been forced to settle with Mahfouz under threat of costly lawsuit. Mahfouz runs his own website where he posts apologies from these accusers and flaunts his victories. In the summer of 2007, Mahfouz sued Cambridge University Press for publishing the book Alms for Jihad, where allegations are made about his collaboration with Osama bin Laden's funding machinery. Such is bin Mahfouz's legal muscle that Cambridge University, established in the year 1209, the world's oldest English-speaking publishing house, put up no fight, promised to turn all unsold copies into pulp, issue an apology, and even made payments to the Saudi billionaire. All of this occurred in Judge Edie's courtroom.
By suing so many, he managed to silence the media from reporting about not only how he, Ben Mahfouz, funded terrorism, but how the others are funding terrorism too.
Dr. Ehrenfeldt chose to ignore the English court in an effort to avoid a costly legal battle. Ehrenfeldt lost the case by default, was ordered to pay more than $225,000, and ordered to personally destroy all copies of her book in England. Even if she had attended, a fair trial was the last thing she would have been afforded.
The foreword for my book was written by the former head of the CIA, James Woolsey. And when the lawyers for Ben Mahfouz came to court and presented the case, they said, well, here is the book, and the foreword for the book was written by James Woolsey. So the judge said, "Oh, Woolsey, say no more. I award your judgment by default, and if you want, an injunction too." And that was it.
In reaction, Dr. Ehrenfeldt has filed a countersuit in American federal court. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals ruled in June of 2007 that the case had merits to go forward and that every American author and publisher can appeal British libel judgments against them in U.S. courts. Prominent civil rights attorney and 30-year ACLU member Harvey Silverglate has identified this case as one of the most important First Amendment cases of the past 25 years. Silverglate adds the potential of many foreigners suing U.S. reporters and publishers for libel to do grave damage to free press is not yet readily recognized. Organizations representing the victims of 9/11 are suing Mahfouz as well, and are awaiting the outcome of Ehrenfeldt's suit to further bolster their cases against the Saudi billionaire.
They are waiting to see how I do the case, because if I win the case, they got it, because he funded Al-Qaeda.
Recently, Mahfouz has become somewhat of a celebrity in the British tabloids.
He purchased a big house in a very expensive area in Mayfair in London, which he was supposed to refurbish, and he bought it in order to stay there together with his 21-year-old lover. Being a Muslim, having a male lover is not exactly a good thing to do.
Ordinarily, such actions would hardly merit any criticism, but if what Dr. Ehrenfeldt says is true, then the sheer level of hypocrisy upon which bin Mahfouz stakes his credibility and reputation is staggering. The average Saudi Arabian would be put to death for such quote-unquote transgressions. In simple terms, why is bin Mahfouz, a Saudi billionaire, suing Ehrenfeldt, an Israeli-American, in English court over a book that wasn't published or even sold in England? We're not saying that he is a terrorist, although he very well might be. We're taking issue with his flagrant abuse of the laws of free society, particularly in the UK, home to the mother of all parliaments. When someone uses their extraordinary wealth to silence their critics, it begs the question, what are they so afraid of? This profoundly troubling case is merely one example of the astonishing corruption involving the men who rule Saudi Arabia. The question we should be asking ourselves is, why are we allowing such a regressive, barbaric, ill-willed regime and its lackeys to abuse Western freedoms and turn our own laws against us?
I didn't say any of this. This is, you saw it on YouTube, it's on the internet. This was, you asked how did they do it. One of the things I've done is this YouTube. I found a wonderful movie and film student at NYU.
Please use the mic.
I use a wonderful student and of film and movie at NYU film school, and he did it as his thesis for his degree, and I helped him with the information and everything, but he did a very good job. And I used it, and this was really before even the judgment. I think it was ruled in, before the judgment in the New York federal court. This was a very, sending this around and showing it, I think had an effective result. Because it's really not Rachel Ehrenfeldt's problem. And I never took it on as my problem. Unfortunately, I had to pay for it, but it was really never my problem. So I was always thinking about ways to reach out and get as many people involved, people that are not aware that their free speech is in danger, to alert them that, well, this is something that they should really fight. As a result of this, we went to, in 2000 and in 2000, and at the end of 2007, December 23rd, 2007, the New York Second District Court, New York Federal Court, ruled that I do have a case. It's very, very important for the First Amendment. However, because jurisdiction in New York State is very limited, the federal court referred to the state court. However, if they cannot rule on my behalf, but if the law state, if jurisdictional laws in the New York State regarding libel will change, I can come back to court. All right, I got the hint. This was in December 23rd, 2007. January 7th, when the New York legislature came back from holidays, vacations, they had a draft of a new libel protection bill before them. And in 3 months, which is really a record unheard of in New York State, an average, a bill takes in average about 10 years to pass in New York, if you can't pass it at all. In 3 months, the law was passed unanimously by the Assembly and the Senate. That's the legislature in New York. And it was signed into law. It is called the Libel Terrorism Protection Act. I actually argued with the legislator and said it's really not libel terrorism, it should be libel tourism, because it's not only limited to information which is related to terrorism. If a scientist writes something that somebody about some defective machine that somebody produced, or some defective medicine that somebody produced, and he writes about it, he will be sued too because, well, the manufacturer doesn't want to lose a lot of money. So the law should apply and applies to more than just national security and terrorism-related issues. When, even before the law was signed in New York, I already approached the Congress, and at the same time I had written a lot in the English media, even American papers at the time did cover it, and even the unbelievable, the problem was so, I managed to explain in the media that the problem is so severe that the United Nations Human Rights Committee acknowledged it is this terrible law. They assessed specifically the British libel laws, and the committee wrote that it was, quote, concerned that the state parties' practical application of the law of libel has served to discourage critical media reporting on matters of serious public interest, adversely affecting the ability of scholars and journalists to publish their work, including through phenomena known as libel tourism. The committee warned that, another quote, state parties' unduly restrictive libel law will affect freedom of expression worldwide on matters of valid public interest, and therefore they warned the British to change it. This was also in 2000, this was the beginning of 2008. This was amazing. But again, even the Human Rights Commission at the UN, you cannot win all the time, but you have to know how to approach it, usually after lunch when they have a lot of wine and they are unaware of what's going on. British media lawyer Mark Stevens, who gained lately a lot of fame because he's defending Assange, says that London has become a town called Sue. Anything viewed or read within the jurisdiction of the English courts can be sued upon. And he was right. In the meantime, the legislation in New York passed, we went to Congress, and in Congress, the Speech Act, as is known, was passed in August, actually it passed in July 2010, and the president signed it kind of in the last minute. He refused to have any ceremony. He refused to, they didn't even publish a statement from the White House. This is the only bill that was passed. It's a bipartisan bill that passed unanimously. The previous Congress was not very friendly Congress. And there was nothing about it anywhere. Now, this is really, if you go to my website, you will see that there is a picture of the president signing it and Representative Cohen is standing there. This was not a photo that was published anywhere. It was actually given to Representative Cohen for his personal use. But you can find it on my website. So it's interesting and it's important because people should know that this bill had passed. Because the White House didn't give it any publicity, the media that should have celebrated this law didn't write about it. However, in England, where the English media woke up following Rachel's law and many articles that I don't know how, but I managed to initiate and write. And it's difficult to write about the same problem and find always something new in order to lead the story. But I did. And now there is a new law, as Lars said, before the British Parliament. In the new law, in the new bill, which should pass in June before they go on summer vacation, for the first time, the British have their libel law since 1849, and they are very proud of them. They are very proud that nothing actually has changed since. Never mind that the world changed, but internet and stuff like that, they are very proud. But now, the law will say for the first time, the truth is a defense, and that honest opinion is a defense too. Moreover, libel tourism will not be allowed. If you are a resident of England, you can sue in England. If you, however, are not resident of England and you cannot prove that huge damage was caused to you because of something that was published in England, then you won't be able to sue in England. Now, the English bar really doesn't like this law. So the English bar is a small number of people. They make a lot of money on these libel laws, on these libel suits. But I hope that the bill will pass more or less the way it is. Now, if the British are actually moving forward, this is huge, because you have the British Commonwealth, and Canada, Australia, and many 57 countries. Not all of them have exactly the same laws as England, but many do. So once the British libel law changes, it will have huge implications. In addition, England is part of the European Union. English had become the major international language. So this can have really interesting ramifications on how libel laws will be now handled, whether libel tourism will be allowed, because there is already talk about limiting lawsuits to their countries. This will not solve certain problems that you have here and every country today, every Western country today has, of certain elements in your society that they really don't want you to speak. But that must be changed through changing your both libel and speech and hate speech laws. You must address those laws because your hate speech really shut you up. So I really hope that Lars and everybody here will succeed in the effort to do that. This is very important because without free speech, We will be like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, in between moving from military regime to more suppressive military regime. So it's very, very important. This is really the core element that protects our democracy, and we should do everything in order to preserve it. Thank you very much.